Live from the Wolf Den Studios, you are listening to Better Live Than Dead.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Me, Ryan Wolfe, at Wolfe BLTD on Twitter. Join on the line. It's kind of a new thing because we've got some new technology here in the Wolf Den Studios. But hey, we've got Brayton Wilson at BJ Wilson WGR, the second co-host of the BLTD podcast. More recently, he's been taking over the co-captain's chair. But Brayton, it's good to have you back. It's good to be talking Sabres hockey with you, man.
I'm so happy to be back. I feel like I'm not on enough.
I feel like we don't podcast anymore at all. I've bought so much equipment so we could podcast more, and I think the equipment to podcast ratio is way off because the more stuff I've purchased, the less we podcast. So maybe I'll just throw all this stuff in the garbage. I don't know.
So oftentimes I just want to talk hockey and talk about stuff, but sometimes I don't get to do it enough, and we just never get the chance.
Well, unfortunately, when I work till the evening and you work in the really early morning, it doesn't work out. But hey, we're here now. As we like to say, we're here, we're live, we're better live than dead.
And you're not.
Wrong timing. Close, but wrong timing. You got the right line, wrong time. Because if that was the case, we'd be stopping talking right now. But anyways, let's stop messing around. Let's get right into the podcast. Let's get right into talking some Buffalo Sabres, man. I mean, right now, the Buffalo Sabres are not good. I mean, it's been kind of not so much the right now as the past couple years. The Sabres have not been good. There have been some signs of improvement, some signs of growth, which has been awesome. Excuse me. Jack Eichel looks fantastic, even with it still nursing his high ankle sprain, because we know those take a long time to go away. He's still nursing a high ankle sprain. Recently, the hot takes have been coming out that the Sabres shouldn't have drafted Sam Reinhart and should have drafted Leon Draisaitl. I think Sam Reinhart's play has put that to rest, that all those people need to shove it. But anyways, the Buffalo Sabres haven't been good. Brayton, in your humble radio opinion, what is going on with the Buffalo Sabres?
Well, I mean, I think it's a culmination of different things. I mean, injuries have an effect on it. Their blue line is completely shattered due to injuries. With the injury to Jake McCabe here in this game, their only left-handed defenseman that's currently on the roster is Justin Falk, who's healthy. And Justin Falk, by all means, is probably a 7-8 defenseman in the NHL. So when you look at that, you just kind of see the blue line is just kind of just a mess right now. You got Cody Franzen playing on the left side. Franzen's not exactly the greatest of the left-hand, not exactly greatest defenseman on the left-hand side as a right-handed defenseman. So not only that, but you look at the forwards, they're not scoring enough. I mean, they're really not shooting the puck either. You look at what Jack Eichel's done over the past few games, he's actually shooting the puck, but I mean, while he's gotten 10 shots, 6 shots, and a bunch of other shots on goal, he's still not shooting enough. In the game against Toronto, there was a couple of times where he's trying to set up things on the power play, and it just wasn't working. I mean, guys are just trying to set things up, trying to be a little too cute, when really it's just get the puck on net, see if you can crash net, get a rebound, or do something like that. But, I mean, it's really is just a lot of different things that are going wrong for the Sabres right now. Not only that, but you look at the goaltending situation, and I get it. A lot of people are saying, well, you look at Anders Nilsson and Robin Lehner, they're both not playing well right now. And Leonard's terrible because we traded a first-round pick for him, and yada, yada, yada. Whatever. Just the whole argument saying, like, well, Leonard was traded for a first-round pick. Who cares? Who cares at this point? Because you probably weren't going to take Colin White at that point anyways. So why are we all fussing about it anyway? But I digress. Another thing that just kind of irritates me. I mean, you look at the Sabres' bottom 6 depth. I mean, it's not exactly the greatest. Your third line right now is Evander Kane, Brian Gianton, Zemgus Girgensons. Well, it's all right. You got Evander Kane. Zemgus Girgensson still has. I mean, he's played better, but he still hasn't proven to be that solid third line center. And then Brian Gianton has taken a step back from earlier in the season, and it seems like that Brian Gianton could be traded at the trade deadline, so then that would shake things up even more. And then you look at our fourth line, it's Cal O'Reilly, Matt Molson, and Will Carrier, and then Nick Delorier rotating in and out. I just, this bottom 6 depth isn't looking that great right now, but again, injuries don't help. So again, just as I said before, a culmination of things have gone wrong for the Sabres this season, and it's coming to a grind here because, injuries keep happening. Sabres still can't find ways to put the puck in the net.
And I was going to just kind of echo on that because right now, I mean, the Buffalo Sabres have not been, past couple of years, we know, they have not been good scoring goals. That is what it is. I mean, right now, they're bottom 5, bottom 6 in the league. They're only scoring about 2.3 goals a game. And that is the worst team being Colorado, who is lingering around just 2 goals a game. So they're scoring more because, I mean, earlier in the season, they were scoring 1-6, 1-7 per game. In the games, they were losing. They were scoring literally a goal or 2 a game every game for stretches, and they would have a game where they'd score 3 goals, and you'd wonder what they did wrong or what they did right to make it happen. Eichel comes back, things start to flow a little better, but they're not flowing good enough. I mean, you can't blame guys like Evander Kane. Ryan O'Reilly has looked kind of on and off, like there's something still going on with him, but he's obviously the type of guy who's not going to sit out if he doesn't have to. I mean, he had an appendectomy on Christmas and was out almost the minimum amount of time that a person can be out with that type of injury. So even if he's not 100%, he's going. Eichel's not 100%, he's going to go. But, I mean, you've got guys like Eichel, Reinhart. I mean, O'Reilly hasn't been bad. Kane's been fantastic. He's been on a pace to score, I think, over 30 goals if he had played the full season. But, again, injuries come into play a factor there. But, yeah, like you said, Brayton, the bottom 6 has been atrocious. It's been good on and off. But obviously with Foligno jumping up with Eichel, with Larson getting hurt, with losing Derek Grant, although Derek Grant wasn't putting goals in the net, putting pucks in net, he was a very valuable player to that bottom 6. And I think where
Derek Grant hurts you the most is in Rochester, because if he did go to Rochester, he'd be their top line center while Cal O'Reilly's playing up here. And I'd much rather have Cal O'Reilly playing up here than Derek Grant. Well,
I mean, and at this point too, Derek Grant was not bad in terms of possession numbers from if I remember correctly. He wasn't horrible for being a 4th line center, but someone else thought he was valuable and they picked him up. That's how waivers work. That's how hockey works. But I think the biggest problem with the Buffalo Sabres this year, and I absolutely hate to say this because we say it feels like every single season, injuries. Always playing a factor. I mean, it happens. Hockey's a tough sport, but it's almost like the strange injuries keep happening to Buffalo. You see Evander Kane earlier in the season get checked into the boards, cracks a few ribs. You see Johan Larsson get checked into the boards. He dislocates his wrist and his elbow. You see Dmitry Kulikov get checked in training camp and in the preseason, and the door opens up just precisely that he hits his backbone and his tailbone in his booty, I guess is the best way to say it. I'm trying not to curse. I'm trying to a new leaf in 2017, Brayton.
The buttocks area.
Yeah, no cursing on podcasts. The gluteus maximus, that area hurts bad because he's still out. He came back, played a few games, couldn't go, still hurt. So, like I said, like to echo what you said, Brayton, when Justin Falk is, he's almost at 30 games on the season. You've got Bogosian, he's played, less than 25 games this season, or less than 30, we'll say at this point. Kulikov has only played 20 games. You've got, Taylor Fedun has been fantastic in spot duty, 6 assists in 16 games. He's been a bright spot. He may be a guy who's earned a spot in the future, or at least a longer look. But this just, I don't know if I feel like this is part of the plan, part of the rebuild. It's not going to be 1 year. It's not going to be 2 years. It may be 3 seasons. I think next year, we all want the rebuild to be over this year. Absolutely. We want the Buffalo Sabres to be in the playoffs and contending for a Stanley Cup by next year or the year after. Doesn't look like it's going to happen. I mean, because the Sabres are still in that transition mode where they're going to figure out who's going to be a part of the team going forward. Who are they going to trade at the deadline, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. We'll throw our hats in the ring there. Who's going to be available for the expansion draft? Are they going to be able to dump Matt Molson's contract, or will they trade Evander Kane? So there's a lot of big questions coming up that, will shape the future of this team. Where does Alex Nylander fit in? Where does Justin Bailey fit in? Where does Nick Baptiste fit in? Because at some point in time, you got to make room for those guys, because you can't continue to bring them up and play them 9 minutes a game on the 4th line with Nick Delorier. I mean, that's not going to work out. So at some point in time, right now, kind of looking big picture, you almost think something has to give. I mean, I understand the hatred about the goaltending. Goaltending hasn't been too bad in comparison. It's not Dominic Hasek and it's not Ryan Miller in net. Yes, I get that. We've been spoiled with good goaltending over the past 15, 20 years at this point, maybe 25 years. The Buffalo Sabres have always, for some reason, had very strong goaltending. And now when the goaltending's mediocre or league average, people are up in arms saying, this goaltender's terrible, and goaltenders are terrible. I don't think that's the case. I mean, Robin Lehner can be better. Nilsson's been great. I mean, I'm not. Anders Nilsson is he's been a revelation for sure.
Compared to career numbers for Anders Nilsson, this has been a stellar year for him.
Yeah, it's been a revival for him, and I went blank there thinking about the word I wanted to say. It's been one of those days, but it's been a revitalization for him, and he'll get paid nicely, kind of like what happened with Chad Johnson. Chad Johnson comes to Buffalo, plays relatively well when Robin Lehner gets hurt, and he goes and now he's in Calgary, and he's getting paid okay money for it. But looking at where the team's headed, I mean, where they've been, where they are, where they're heading, is this something where you think it's salvageable, where they have a few parts that they can splice in and make a run at the playoffs? Because they're not too far out. I mean, as of I know we're recording during a week where there's games happening, so it can change at an instant. So I kind of ballpark it at this point. Right now, Buffalo looks to be about 10 points out of a playoff spot, out of the third position in the Atlantic. You got Toronto, Florida, Tampa, Detroit above Buffalo. Buffalo lost a lot of important games, a lot of important points against teams like Boston and Toronto, and even Tampa Bay recently. Do you think this is something where they can salvage the season, or do you think it's time to pack it in, cut the fat, essentially trade the veterans, trade guys, and then just bring in kids and try to get people NHL experience and just prepare for next season?
Well, I mean, after this week, after tonight, you've got 3 more games before the All-Star break. I think you have to at least get 4 or 5 or even 6 points out of the 6 possible points that you can get in order to even have a chance. Because I mean, you look back at when the Ottawa Senators made their miraculous run a couple of years ago when they had Andrew Hammond. They were something like 12 points out in February, and I mean, they went on a miracle run. Not only that, but they had some help because Boston completely collapsed. Excuse me, but excuse me again. I'm all mucusy today.
You're okay.
But with the Sabres though, they really need a lot of help. I mean, they've got some tough games coming up in the stretch ahead. I mean, I'm looking at their team matchups that they still have to play. They still have to go out west and play teams like Anaheim, LA, San Jose, Arizona. They still have to play Columbus 3 times, and Columbus has played really well, better than I expected them to play this season. They still got to play Colorado, so that'll help. They have 2 games against Colorado you have to play. But I mean, they do have some tough games remaining in the schedule. And a team like Montreal, they have to play them yet 3 times. Nashville, they have to play twice. I mean, just continuing to go down the schedule here, looking at some of these matchups that they have. It's not an easy road down the stretch here. They're going to need to put some games together and put together a really good, nice win streak down the stretch. Because if they don't, then they're going to be looking at a top 10 pick again this year. And I wouldn't be upset with that. Another top 10 pick is fine. But the fact is we want to see this team succeed. We want to see them actually win. And right now, I'm kind of feeling like this is just another Lindy Ruff team before he was fired, where the Sabres were atrocious for the first 40, 50 games of the season. Then in the final 20, 30 games, they go on this incredible run and almost make the playoffs or just barely make the playoffs. If they could do that again this year, that would be impressive. But, I mean, I'm going to give it till about the 10th of February. If the Sabres are still where they are in the 10th of February, I'm just saying let's go for top 5. Let's see what we can do. I'm not going to sell off any major parts or anything, but I'm selling off guys like Brian Giant. I'm going to try and trade a guy like Anders Nilsson and maybe a couple of other people, but we'll see what happens. I think that the Sabres could put up some production and put up some points down the stretch here, but it's certainly a difficult task with if I could do my math correctly here, 38 games left.
Sounds about
including
right.
Tonight's game.
Yeah, it sounds about right. I think at this point it's one of those situations where with the expansion draft coming up in June, a lot of teams are going to be very active coming up at the deadline. Tim Murray has always fancied himself as a guy who likes to get better as quick as possible. We've seen that. He's made deals for Evander Kane, made deals for Ryan O'Reilly. But at some point in time, you have to get more players to supplement those guys.
Right.
And there may be a top 4 defenseman available from a team like Anaheim. I know we've been talking about this for, it seems like 2.5 years now, But with the draft coming up, teams like Anaheim, who have a surplus of defensemen, or a team that has a surplus of really good forwards, if they want to risk losing it for nothing, feel free. But last time I checked, general managers don't like to do that. And if Tim Murray can go out there and say, you know what, we're not good, we're going to not make the playoffs, but we can go out and get a guy to pair with Ristolainen, in that way we can have, you know, a very solid Jake McCabe who's made the leap that everybody wanted him to make, or wanted to see him make this season. We all thought he could, you know, and then he actually comes out, puts money where his mouth is, and he becomes a pretty damn good defenseman. You can, if you can kind of push talent further down, obviously that makes your team better. I mean, it was a couple games ago where the Sabres actually had 3 lines. They were rolling 3 lines that could score. I can't remember the last time the Buffalo Sabres had 3 lines that could score while not having to sacrifice their good players. I mean, it's been very long where the Sabres are running 1 good line or 2 good lines, and then the 3rd line is fringe 4th line, and the 4th line is a group of AHLers who have no business being in the NHL, which, I mean, aside, you know, Will Carey has done a pretty good job this season of proving his worth, and I think he's part of the bottom 6, but aside from Will Carey, that 4th line has been Rochester written all over it the entire season, and that's not going to win you hockey games, because you can go out and play, like, for instance, like you think about it, Rasmus Ristolainen is playing, like, you know, 25, 30 minutes a game, 28 or 27, 28, 39, 29, 30 minutes a game. I can't even talk. Plays a lot of time. He plays a lot of time every game. Over the course of a season, say the Sabres would make the playoffs when Ristolainen is playing 30 minutes a game. By the time the playoffs roll around, he's going to be burnt out. I mean, it doesn't matter. You could be in the greatest shape of any hockey player in the history of hockey. You play that many minutes, it's going to catch up with you.
Well, you'll get Ryan Suter. That's exactly what happened to him. He played 30 minutes, and, you know, the past couple of years when the Wild were in the playoffs, it looks almost like he is burned down, and I totally agree with your point. You know, a guy like that, he's had so much experience in this league. He's a veteran, but even then, it's just like you gotta be careful with your defensemen, with your best players. You can't have them out there too long. It's almost like you. I mean, I was talking about this earlier with another colleague of ours, Jody Biasi, who also works with me at WTR. I was telling Joe earlier, it's just like, you know, the Sabres team, you look at their 4th line, their AHL, it screams AHL. Next year, you want to have a lineup where you can say, look, I've got my top 2 lines, whether it's my best 6 players. My 3rd line is pretty decent guys on the team who can move up easily to the 2nd or 1st line if somebody gets hurt. And then the 4th line is guys like, that's what you want your checking line to be. You want guys like Marcus Foligno to play on that line. You want guys like Johan Larsson to be on that line. That's what this team needs to be all about. And I think that next year, you know, we could see young kids like Justin Bailey, Nick Baptiste, or even Alex Nylander on this roster, or who knows, maybe the Sabres will get lucky and get a top 3 pick in the draft lottery, and we'll be picking in the top 3. But, I mean, at this point, you know, you definitely want to see the Sabres establish themselves with a good set of 3 lines, and then have your 4th line be guys who could still play in the AHL or in the NHL, but not look like total scrubs like a Nick Delorier or something like that. I mean, it's so infuriating to just, you know, see a guy like Delorier struggle so much and then just look completely god awful on the ice. It's
and then
really
continue to get chances.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, this is what the Sabres need to do. They need to establish those lines. Not only that, but they also got to find some help on the defense, and I think it's coming because you've got Brendan Gooley, who's in the Western Hockey League. He's got 1 more year, and he'll likely be in the NHL or at least the AHL. Then you have another guy like Will Borgen, who's playing really well with St. Cloud State University. He's probably going to be in the AHL within the next year or 2. I mean, the Sabres, I mean, and I also pointed this out too on Twitter earlier today. It's just like this team, you know, people look at Rochester and say, oh, God, they're horrible. And then they blame Tim Murray saying, well, you know, look at our prospects. They're terrible. Like, how good of a GM is Tim Murray really? And it's just like, look, you're not looking at the bigger picture. You're not looking at this Canadian Hockey League where you got guys like Cliff Poo, who's playing in London, who's playing phenomenal right now. You got guys like Brendan Gooley, who's in the Western Hockey League. Then you look at the NCAA. You've got Will Borgen. You got Cal Peterson out there. I mean, it's such a broader picture. Even in Europe, you've got Rasmus Asplund, who's playing a really good game right now in the Swedish Hockey League. I mean,
there's such a bigger picture for prospects, and the Sabres, they're still going to have prospects that are going to be developing in the next 2 years. I mean, all these guys that we've drafted and all these guys that we've hyped up over the past few years, they're just starting to finally get into the bigger picture of things and look, into the future for the Sabres. And within the next year or two, we'll see some of them. Some other ones will eventually gradually come over into North America or, in the AHL. And then the Amerks will look good, and then the Sabres will look good, because the Amerks right now, they are not good. The other night, I went to their game against Scranton Wilkes-Barre, and that was the closest AHL lineup I've seen them have all year, and even then, they were getting outmatched physically, outmatched just with speed to one of the best teams in the AHL. And they're still young. They've still got guys that are, 20, 21, 22, 23. And then they've got other guys like Cal O'Reilly. They've got a guy like Tim Kennedy who's back in the organization now. But those guys are older. They've been around. They're your experienced players. And within the next couple of years, you're going to see that be completely different. You're going to see the AHL be more developmental for the Sabres. They're going to have guys that are younger down there playing really good and not be able to come up to the NHL to play because there's already good enough players here. So, I mean, to overreact the way that people have been over the past few weeks, I think it's just a little over the top. I think it's time to just step back, look at the bigger picture, and just realize, okay, we've got people that are in this organization that are slowly developing, but that's not a bad thing. They can develop as long as they want because they have that time. When you look at Nick Baptiste, Justin Bailey, they've had time in the OHL to develop. They've had a couple of years in the AHL. Now next year, it seems like they could have a chance to play full-time in the NHL, which is awesome.
And the thing is, like you said, it takes time, because you look at what Darcy Regier left the Buffalo Sabres when he lost his job. And while the Sabres had a lot of prospects that were in the NHL at that point that had developed in the system, the gap between Murray's guys and Regier's guys is very evident. I mean, yeah, Darcy Regier drafted guys like Jake McCabe, but from there on, you can tell where they had a couple bad years of drafting, which obviously led to guys like Darcy Regier getting fired, because you're missing out. You're hitting on guys that aren't good or aren't going to develop into anything, or just literally don't ever play in the system. That also happens as well.
Evan Sundher.
Yeah, exactly. But at this point, from what we have seen, Tim Murray appears to have hit on some picks. Granted, they haven't come to the professional ranks yet, but it's good to see Sabres prospects in their respective areas succeeding and playing very well. So the expectation is high, but it takes time. It takes time to build Rochester. It takes time to build Buffalo.
Right, and you look at the amount of picks that Tim Murray had to draft. You look at the amount of players that he's traded away and brought in. I mean, it takes a good 4 or 5 years. So for people to say, well, Tim Murray's job should be on the line here, I don't see why that's the case. I think Tim Murray, he was hired, 2014? He brought in January 2014. I mean, he's going into his third full year as the general manager of this hockey team. I mean, after 2 more years, then maybe I'd start criticizing him. But at this point, I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, you brought in guys like Ryan O'Reilly. You drafted Jack Eichel. You drafted Sam Reinhart. You brought in Kyle Oposo. But those guys can only do so much, and you're seeing it right now. They only can do so much. They can't play the entire time, or else they're going to get shot. I mean, you got to fill out the rest of the roster, and that takes some time because, A, you got to look at what's out there, and B, you might not be able to find those guys because the free agent class or the trade market is just not there for the team.
And I mean, at this point, and we'll transition over to the trade market here in just a second with the Buffalo Sabres in regards. I mean, it's difficult to see the actual progress now because the Sabres are the same team year after year after year after year. But you got to remember, they didn't have Jack Eichel. They didn't have Sam Reinhart. Now they have 2 solid top 6 forwards who themselves may fill out a top line, depending on how you draw up your lines, whatever it may be. Who cares? But I mean, you wonder, you have to have the talent, and the only way to get the talent in this day's NHL is the draft. You have to hit on players high, so therefore you can go out and pick up guys in free agency who are older, who are more seasoned, who will fill the role that they need to fill. So, I mean, at this point, the Sabres aren't there. We know that. We see that. We're overly optimistic. They had a great finish to last year, and everyone thought next year's a season they can pull out and get into the playoffs. And that's what I thought too. I'm sure I remember, if I'm not mistaken, Brayton, you thought the same thing as well. Either we thought the playoffs or thought very close to the playoffs. Right now, they're nowhere near it. Now, maybe they go on a late run, but right now it's not looking good. But look it, I'm not for firing Tim Murray. I'm not for firing Dan Bilesma. I mean, you're asking them to do, anyone else, a 5, 6, 7 year rebuild in 2 to 4 years. And if they make the playoffs next year, if they don't make the playoffs next year, start asking questions, because clearly you've had enough time to turn things around, to develop some guys, to bring some guys in. You didn't do it, whatever. It may not work. Fine, whatever. We'll talk then. Right now, not happening.
Right. And I mean, what was it that I wanted to bring up with the roster? Oh, yeah. I mean, you see the group of players that this team has. I mean, people will say, well, Brendan Gooley probably should have been here for the entire year, not sent back to junior, so we wouldn't have to make these emergency recalls. Yeah, I get that. But the thing is that I don't think the Sabres expected all these injuries to happen on the blue line anyways. I don't think they expected Dmitry Kulikov to get hurt, especially the first game of the preseason, and then have the freak injury that he had happen. I don't think people expected Josh Georges. I don't think people expected right now Jake McCabe to get hurt. I mean, things happen like that. But then again, you look at the defensive depth on the blue line in the AHL and in the NHL, it's not really that great. So that's probably the only thing I'd criticize Tim Murray for this year, is not addressing the blue line. I think that he thought that this blue line was good, but he obviously didn't prepare himself for any type of injury situations that happen. So if you want one thing to criticize Tim Murray, fine. You can criticize him on the blue line, on the depth on the blue line.
Now, the one question, I want to ask you a specific trade question before we actually just kind of go into a brief discussion about trades, about the deadline coming up here. Mm-hmm. Evander Kane, a very interesting case study this season. He misses a bunch of games, as we saw. He comes back and he's been absolutely red hot. I mean, 12 goals in 33 games. His shooting percentage is, and this is what I wanted to ask you, Brayton, his shooting percentage from last year to this year, 7.4 to 11.8 through 33 games. His career numbers are an 8.9% shooting percentage. Is this one thing we saw last year in Kane's brief time with the Buffalo Sabres? He's very good at making his Corsi numbers look good because he takes so many shots. Not all good, most are terrible. He had 271 shots last season in 65 games. Through 33 this year, a little bit lower pace, 102 shots. Do you think he's adjusted his game to take better shots? Because remember, he was taking terrible shots, also taking shots from damn near the blue line every single time, just putting the puck on net, just trying to generate a shot or generate a chance. Most of the time, shot it directly in the goalie's chest. It was, stopped for whatever it may be or bounced off. But with Evander Kane's shooting percentage up, is this an aberration? Is this a new thing? Is he an improved player, or is this an aberration? Should the Sabres keep him, or should they take this offensive explosion this season, bet high or sell high and get rid of him and try to bring something back of merit? Or do you think it's something they should see through to the end?
I think that right now the Sabres should hold on to Evander Kane. I think that he's playing some of the best hockey he's played in his career. You look back at the year that he scored 30 goals in Winnipeg, he was playing extremely well. Now, I know that he's been plagued with injuries here and there in Winnipeg, in Buffalo. It started out this year when he came back. It obviously looked like he wasn't healthy, but now he looks like he's healthy. He looks like he's playing 100% of the time, and he looks phenomenal. And I'll be the first one, if nobody else has said it, I think the Sabres need to hold on to Evander Kane unless they're getting the perfect trade. That means you're getting a top-tier defenseman in return, whether it's, maybe a Kevin Shattenkirk, which I wouldn't be wanting to trade Evander Kane for Kevin Shattenkirk at this time. But, I think that if the Sabres do get the right kind of package in a trade for Evander Kane, then maybe you pull the trigger. But, at this point right now, that market for Evander Kane might not be there. So if it's not there, then don't rush to trade Evander Kane. He's playing well enough. As long as he stays out of trouble on the off the ice, I think that he is playing some really good hockey. He's staying disciplined. Not only that, but I think that as you mentioned, the quality of chances that he's putting on net have been better. I think that he's not just trying to shoot the puck on net just because, I got to get it on net. I think with Evander Kane, he's seen the ice better. I think that he's getting better chances because he's creating it for himself with his speed. So, yeah, I mean, I would hold on to Evander Kane for now. But again, if that perfect trade comes up where you get the piece that you always wanted and you think you're going to be a better team because of it, then maybe I'd be open to it. But right now, I'm completely fine with where Evander Kane is and where the Sabres are with him.
So now that brings me to my next question for you, Brayton. The Buffalo Sabres, as we've mentioned throughout this podcast, if you don't know by now, they're not very good, so they may be looking into trading some more players. As per usual, it seems like with with every season comes trade rumors and trade discussions. Now, the Buffalo Sabres do have some expiring contracts, some players with a year or two left on their deal that may be enticing to other teams. Like I said, especially with the expansion draft coming up as well in June, the Buffalo Sabres may be more inclined to move guys that they don't see part of the future for a guy they may see as the future, a guy they may want to end up protecting that another team doesn't want to protect. Going to be a very weird time. Let's just put it there. Aside from Evander Kane, who are some of the players or some of the names we may look into seeing rumors about in the next few weeks, next month or so, as the trade deadline approaches?
I think I mentioned Brian Giunta earlier. Aside from that, I mean, if you get another trade for a guy like, I don't know, Zemgus Girgensons maybe. But right now, especially for the Sabres with the trade market, I don't know if they want to trade anybody. I don't think you really can trade anybody unless they get healthy. And maybe a Kulikov is another one that you could try and trade. But at this point, it's difficult to say who's going to be available on the trade market because A, injuries, and B, if you're going to trade somebody right now, then who are you going to bring up? I mean, you could bring up obviously Baptiste Bailey, but on defense especially, what are you going to do? Are you going to recall Brendan Gooley and just ruin, Prince George's chances of winning a WHL championship? I mean, maybe, but I mean, I just don't. It's difficult right now. I think Brian Giunta's number one on the list. He's, I think, number 11 on TSN's trade bait list, which is kind of surprising to me that he's that high. But he's in the last year of his contract. He's going to be a really nice rental person. But I think that aside from Giunta, it's difficult to tell. I think that maybe we can try and find a deal for maybe another guy. But I mean, Giunta at this point is the only guy that I think by trade deadline day I'll be expecting him to be off the board and off somewhere else.
I mean, I was thinking, just looking at the Sabres cap situation right now, maybe you can pull a deal off if you don't want to put Tyler Ennis out there on the market, and you don't want to protect him, trade him. That could be a potential. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking more bigger picture here. Molson not going anywhere. Evander Kane may be going somewhere, but I would put the odds on that being very, very low. In terms, I almost think at this point, to me, it seems like it's either Kane or Ennis, because they're the same player. I mean, they're making around the same. I mean, Evander makes a little more than Ennis does, but the cap hits around the same. They're the same type of player. I mean, Kane's younger than Ennis is, but it all depends on the market. So that would be something I'd keep an eye on. I think Giunta is as good as gone. I mean, you can do right by Giunta, do right by your captain, and essentially give him a send-off wherever he wants to go. I mean, obviously, I think that at some point in time, Tim Murray needs to stop doing. I know it's a good thing to send a player where they want to go, but at some point in time, you got to take the best deal available. And if that's not where the guy wants to go, who cares? Exactly. That's just me, though. I play NHL on PS3, so I'm not, I'm no general manager, but I don't give a damn. Anyways, I would say, like I said, a guy like Giunta, I would have said Johan Larsson if he was still healthy, but obviously that's a push at this point. I mean, maybe Zemgus Girgensons, but I think he's probably needed enough where they would want to keep him around, either to keep him around or to try to increase his trade value for the offseason. Defensively, I mean, like you said, Brayton, maybe Dmitry Kulikov if he comes back. but I think they would get rid of Kulikov only if they didn't see him as a piece to the future, which at this point, him being hurt with the expansion draft coming up may benefit the Buffalo Sabres because people wanted to see Kulikov outside of Florida to see essentially see what he could do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not really any tape on him because he's been hurt a lot. And when he's been on the ice, he's been playing injured. So, excuse me, we'll see what happens there. I think Georges, especially being hurt, Georges is a no-go.
No, even then, I don't even think anybody would want him. But another thing is, let's just not forget, Tim Murray loves to make these big hockey trades.
Yep.
And we all want to, and that's another thing is that if Evander Kane's going to get traded, Tim Murray's going to want to make a big hockey trade that's going to benefit both sides. And would it be smart to try and pull it off and rush it before the trade deadline? I mean, if it's been in the works for a couple of months now, then maybe it would work. But I mean, if you're going to go to the trade deadline and then all of a sudden expect a big hockey trade to happen, I think you're getting your hopes too high. So I just think that if you want to trade Evander Kane, you might want to wait until the offseason when you can make that big trade and maybe get a big value for it, a better value. But at this point, I'm in no rush to try and make a huge major move.
The last two names I was going to mention were Cody Franzen, UFA at the end of the season. But then again, if you trade him, you're putting you're going to have to bring back somebody because you have nobody.
Right.
Rochester, Buffalo's already exhausted all options in Rochester. You can call up Eric Bergdorfer, but you want to try to win. And Bergdorfer, if you need him for a game or two, might work. But if you're trying to play a long stretch and he's going to be your sixth, that might not be very good.
Right.
Anders Nilsson, I mean, you can bring up Linus Hallmark, but that doesn't really help development.
Nope, doesn't help Rochester either because then you're starting goaltender John Mute.
If you're gonna go and try to develop Hallmark and want to give him time in Buffalo, I'm all for it. But then again, that's saying you're giving up on Robin Lehner, and I don't know if they're ready to do that either. So that'll be interesting. We're probably overanalyzing this as we normally do, but that's our job. We like to talk sports and listen to sports and do all that fun garbage. So, at some point in time, either we're proven wrong or we're proven right. But you know what? I personally still want to see a trade with Anaheim happen. I know last offseason we had the carrot above us. We were the rabbit with the carrot in front of us. We were about to get the carrot. They pulled it up. I want to find out. We probably never will unless it happens. But I want to find out what this Anaheim trade was and why won't it happen?
Right.
Because if it brings Buffalo, because I don't think Buffalo's far from a playoff spot. But right now, with their defense, they have two good defensemen. Maybe three, depending on... I mean, you could say four, depending on your definition. But Ristolainen and McCabe, that's it. Bogosian and Kulikov, Georges and Franson, hell no. Fedun and Falk, that's Rochester's gimmick. If you can bring another guy in... I mean, that would certainly help things out a lot. But, I mean, I'm trying to, do a big picture thing in my head right now. Forwards-wise, Buffalo can probably benefit from Rochester's kind of talent pool that they have there with Bailey, with Baptiste, with Nylander. I think, without a shadow of a doubt, Alex Nylander is going to be up with Buffalo next season, probably going to play with Eichel and Sam Reinhart because, again,
that line's going to be fantastic.
We saw Eichel and Reinhart break up, got back together because it wasn't working out alone from each other. We know that's going to stick. But you bring a guy because we've seen Foligno with those guys, not bad, but not what I'm looking for. Put a guy like Nylander in. You can shelter him with two very talented players. I'm not saying Nylander is as good as or better than Eichel or Reinhart, but he has the skill. We've seen him put the skill on display. We saw it at the World Junior Championships. We've seen it in the AHL in limited fashion, but nonetheless in the AHL. If he can get the hang of the professional game down and the speed of the professional game, I don't see why that'll be a problem. So again, I want to see at some point in time, maybe it's Baptiste, maybe it's Bailey, but build that bottom six, start rolling thicker lines, get a better defenseman. Because I listen to the instigators. I got to give some love to Brayton because, like I said, I try to listen as much as possible so I can hear your sports updates, so I can check out your producing jobs and make sure you're doing a good job.
Oh, well, thank you.
No problem. I always gotta keep an eye out for Hockey Bay. Can't let it go away. But the thing I heard recently was that they were talking about what do the Sabres need to do at the deadline. They're like, oh, well, get a top 6 forward, get a top 6 defenseman, get a, this, and that. And I'm like, that's absurd. You can't. When was the last time a team went out and acquired a top 6 forward, a top 6 defenseman, and like an NHL starting goaltender all at one time or in a trade deadline? It doesn't happen very often. And if it does, Buffalo's going to have to overpay by a ton to get it done. Like, yeah, even getting a number 1 defenseman is going to cost Buffalo a lot and may cost them some prospects they don't want to give up. But again, you can either pay the price to get the player or you can be fired in watching someone else build a team with your players. I mean, because it's coming down to that at this point in my mind, where you got to crap or get off the pot, essentially. Like, you know what you need to do to get better, do it. Because if this season hasn't made it obvious, I don't know what's going to. Like, you need to you need to get deeper and better. That's what they've always been trying to do, but now they actually have the foundation in place. They've got good offensive players, decent defenders. Who knows what they're doing in goal, but that'll figure itself out. You got to fill the gaps in now. If you don't fill the gaps in, like I said, you're going to be on Sportsnet watching someone else build your team, and you're going to be talking about, I remember Rasmus Ristolainen, he was a great player. Now someone else has made him even better. Or this team was going to be great, and then someone else made him better, because you didn't do your job well. So I'm not advocating people getting fired. I'm just saying, you know what the problem is, fix it.
Right. And again, these big trades that I know Andrew and Craig have been trying to talk about with, we should try and get a top defenseman, try and get a top forward. They're not going to happen at the trade deadline. Very rarely do they ever happen at the trade deadline.
I mean, maybe this deadline, like I said, because of the expansion draft, sorry, Brayton, but maybe because of the expansion draft, people may get a little more trigger happy just because, again, you don't want to risk losing a very talented hockey player for nothing.
Right.
So maybe someone will say, you know what, player X he's really good, but he's not in our future. And if we have 4 guys and we need 3 to go and one 3 stay, 1 go, he's the guy we picked. Unfortunately, he's the best of the worst of the best or whatever, best of the worst. But that's going to happen. I think we're probably going to see some very big names moved at the deadline. Is Buffalo in on them? I don't know. That's what we're going to find out. But that's the exciting part about it. Probably going to be a lot of butthurt people, I'm sure, at the deadline, but that's always the most exciting part.
There are always butthurt people.
Everybody. Buffalo does butthurt well.
Yes, very well.
But Brayton, I do want to, before we go too long and we rant for the rest of the evening, because we can do that. We've done it before. If you've listened to any past Better Live Than Dead Sabrecasts, we can go off for hours, for days, for weeks. You guys should see us together. Before we podcast in person, we'll sit around and we'll talk for 45 minutes. And then out of nowhere, we decide to podcast for another hour and a half. And then by then we're talking for 3 hours or so. And it's, that's what happens. So this is what happens when you get 2 people in a room together who like sports just as much and can talk just as well as they like sports. But I want to say, before we wrap this bad boy up, I want to send a quick shout out to people over at the 716 Sports Network for letting us jump on, have our podcast on. We appreciate you guys. It's a new fun thing. Hopefully becomes kind of a stalwart of the Buffalo podcasting community, because we've seen a couple new Buffalo podcasts show up. All fantastic stuff. The people who've been podcasting before have also continued to put out very good quality. Makes me and you want to do this more and throw out even better quality. But Brayton, you can follow him at BJ Wilson WGR on Twitter. I'm at Wolfe BLTD on Twitter. Hold on one second. I see here now, to break down the fourth wall. I try to not date the podcast, but it's the 20th of January. Justin Bailey scores twice in Rochester. He's scored goals in 6 straight, points in 7 straight. Chris Baker at Sabres Prospects points that out. Maybe Bailey's ready. Who knows? We'll see soon. But I'm at Wolfe BLTD on Twitter. Check us out, bltdsports.com, facebook.com/bltdsports. Twitter is at bltdsports. I think I hit it all. Tune in. We'll be here. We're coming back for more soon. We're going to talk more. We'll probably have like a trade deadline special podcast coming up. Maybe get a couple of special guests. Maybe we get our buddy Joe Yearden on. Who knows? We'll see. But Brayton, I appreciate you joining me tonight. Anything else you want to add here?
No, I mean, I think that one thing I will add is that I mentioned this also on Twitter earlier. If you want more on the Sabres prospects, really, really go be sure to follow Sabres prospects. It's Chris Baker. He does a phenomenal job. He knows what he's talking about. He knows the prospects and how everyone's doing because he watches almost all the prospects all the time. I mean, he's up early watching guys like Rasmus Asplund playing in the Swedish Hockey League. They're 6 hours ahead of us. I mean, he's watching them, and he's dedicated to what he does to bring Sabres fans good quality content on the prospects. So if you don't follow him already, please give him a follow on Twitter.
And I do want to let you know that the two podcasts I wanted to throw out there, the two new podcasts. First off, obviously our friend Chris Ostrander and Tyler Roeder over at 2 in the Box. They're fantastic. You got the half-hour hockey show at HH_hockey show and the Oddcast podcast. Our buddy Joe Yurden, Tom Martin at Channel 4. Good stuff. And it makes, like I said, it makes us all want to be better. So appreciate you guys. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Thanks to everybody for everything you do. Thanks for the Sabres for being bad. Give us something to talk about.
At least Ryan O'Reilly's really good.
Ryan O'Reilly's good. I do see that. Again, I'm stalling here, but I want to say thank you everybody for tuning in. We are better live than dead.
And you are not.
Brayton, you nailed it. I want to thank you guys.
I got
again.
it right that time.
I want to thank you guys again for tuning in. Brayton, you nailed it. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the hockey. See ya.